Cal.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute's Foster Youth Internship Briefing. This report today are the recommendations shared in the published report, Wellbeing in Action, Expanding Equitable Access to Comprehensive Support for Foster Youth. My name is Kate McLean, and I'm the Executive Director of CCAI. CCAI is a nonprofit entity of the largest bipartisan bicameral caucus in the U.S. Congress. Over 160 members of the 117th Congress have joined and are actively engaged in supporting legislation and policy that improve the lives of children and families in the United States and around the world. Both the CCA and CCAI are deeply committed to bipartisanship, strengthening families, and permanency. One of CCAI's signature programs is the Foster Youth Internship Program, the FYI program. FYI is a congressional internship for young adults who have experienced the U.S. foster care system. These experiences allow the foster youth interns to present this policy report before you in Congress today, in addition to the administration, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and private sectors next week, in addition to being released to child welfare advocates across the country. CCAI exists to bridge the gap between congressional leaders, advocates, policy influencers, foundations, child welfare and adoption professionals, and service providers. And as a convener, CCAI brings together voices of experience and expertise to the U.S. Congress. When members of Congress hear direct experiences of those engaged and affected by child welfare systems, they become committed to this issue and work to bring about legislative improvements to ensure each child's right to a family is realized. Without further delay, I'm honored to introduce 7 leaders, the authors of this report: April, Stormy, Christina, Nigeria, Anna, Lena, and Ryan. These talented leaders come from California to Connecticut, coast to coast, and many states in between, and bring with them varied but equally impressive backgrounds of advocacy, volunteering, and professional experiences. We hope you are inspired by these experts and their ideas and solutions for change. I'd now like to introduce California native, spoken word and photography extraordinaire, Master of Social Work graduate, and the person behind TikTok's viral Everything College to Pick Us Up, Christina Parker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Christina Parker, and I have the honor of kicking off our policy brief today. We are here today because of our brothers, sisters, and non-gender conforming people with lived experience who have created the foundation for our recommendations to be heard, for our presence to be known, and for the foster care system to be transformed to meet the needs of those currently and previously in foster care. In the last 2 months, Nigeria, Ryan, Anna, Stormy, Lena, April, and I have sacrificed our summer to conduct research and relive our past to echo the voices of our community, to affirm the urgency to address housing insecurity, the lack of college accessibility, mitigating the intersections of juvenile justice and the foster care system, addressing the needs of those with chronic illness or limited movement mobility, and most importantly, to inspire change. These recommendations and stories you will hear aren't ours alone. They're shared not only among my colleagues, but by many other amazing people who came out of a not-so-pretty system. We continue to carry the torch that burns to meet the needs of youth, children, and adults who have experienced the foster care system. In the words of my inner poet, a system that's built without those who will be impacted isn't a system worth building. Creating legislation that isn't collaborative with the communities it targets isn't legislation worth passing. And to hear us and not act is a disservice to the 400,000 foster children who are waiting for a caring system that is secure, a system that is just, and a system that every youth, child, and adult can flourish outside of. Thank you.
Hello, my name is April Barkus. I'm a senior at Rutgers University, Newark, and prior to moving to New Jersey, I grew up in foster care in Los Angeles County. I experienced severe chronic pain in my entire body and have since I was 12 years old. I distinctly remember asking for help in many different settings while in care, to be told that I just didn't want to go to school, or I had staff members brushing off that pain. In one of the group homes I was placed in, they didn't believe that my migraines were real. They would come into my room, turn on the lights, take my blanket, and bang on the door with a bunch of keys, yelling at me to get up. As I got older, I started to believe that my pain was normal, and I stopped looking for answers until finally I couldn't ignore that I was disabled. I suffer from multiple chronic illnesses, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, that have resulted in needing to use a walker. Although I'm still working on getting official diagnoses for some parts, finding answers to my long-standing health issues made so much of my experience make much more sense. Adverse childhood experience scores, or ACEs, are commonly used to explain the correlation between trauma and being at a higher risk for certain physical illness and disabilities. A score above a 4 out of 10 has been shown to be an indicator for risk for things like strokes, heart conditions, autoimmune disorders, and chronic pain, to name a few. All foster youth experience trauma because removal from one's family is a trauma. We are more likely to have an ACE score of 4 or above than of our peers after care. And that isn't accounting for the number of youth that enter care because of an already existing disability. Despite all of this, the infrastructure for getting youth in care, access to healthcare, and training child welfare workers is severely lacking. That is why I urge Congress to ensure continuous access to high-quality healthcare for all foster youth by requiring a centralized healthcare system that can be accessed by the youth and their care team, a streamlined transition process between old and new healthcare providers that enables the youth to self-advocate for their care needs, a robust doctor of origin policy that provides parameters for the youth to stay with their current provider, and a comprehensive system that leverages Medicaid to cover all healthcare expenses, even across state lines and after aging out of care. I also urge Congress to create legislation to provide foster youth with a healthcare advocate who will help guide, support, and troubleshoot with current and former foster youth as they navigate the complex healthcare system. And lastly, I urge Congress to help develop and implement a training program that is mandatory for all providers and caregivers to help them address and support the unique and complex healthcare needs of current and former foster youth. For better understanding of these recommendations, you can read my full report. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I'd now like to turn it to Representative Jim Langevin of Rhode Island's 2nd District. Mr. Langevin is a member of the Congressional Coalition on Adoption and in leadership of the House's Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth. Congressman Langevin is also a co-chair of the Bipartisan Disabilities Caucus. The caucus believes awareness is among the biggest roadblocks to accessibility, and they work to educate members of Congress and their staff on the issues affecting Americans with disabilities. April, thank you for important advocacy on enhancing comprehensive medical supports for youth in foster care. Mr. Langevin, I'll turn it to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Langevin, and I represent the 2nd Congressional District of Rhode Island. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth, along with my colleagues Representative Bass, Bacon, Lawrence, and Mullen. As CCF-wide co-chairs, our mission is to make sure the voices of foster youth are heard in the halls of power. Through briefings, dinners, and partnerships with organizations like the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, or CCAI, we strive not only to educate other members of Congress on the issues facing foster youth, but to ensure that foster youth are helping to shape the policy agenda here in Washington. CCAI's Foster Youth Internship, FYI, program is an excellent example of how to bring youth voices into the policymaking process. Now, I've hosted CCAI interns in the past, so I have seen firsthand how valuable your insights and experiences are to me and my staff. I also know that many of the policy recommendations CCAI interns have made over the years have been turned into bills, and some have even become law. Even outside of the FYI program, we make a point to listen to youth wherever possible. For example, throughout the pandemic, I've convened several town halls to hear directly from the young people most impacted by COVID-19 and all the health, economic, and social consequences stemming from it. As a result of those town halls and other input from youth across the country, I introduced legislation in 2020 to expand the Chafee Transition to Independence program so that it could serve as a safety net for older foster youth during the pandemic. Largely due to the advocacy of young people like you, we were able to enact crucial provisions for foster youth in December 2020, including a big boost to Chafee and a moratorium on aging out care. While the pandemic has been exceedingly difficult for foster youth, I believe these protections were vital to providing young people with a path back to normalcy. For example, in my home state of Rhode Island, nearly 200 current and former foster youth receive services or financial assistance through this funding, helping them continue their education, obtain a driver's license, or afford basic necessities like rent and groceries. None of that would have happened, though, without the dedication and advocacy of foster youth just like you. Clearly, the work you are doing this summer to shape federal policy will have an impact well beyond the halls of Congress. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to reading the recommendations you have for us this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congressman Langevin. I'd now like to introduce another congressman, Representative Robert Adderholt. Mr. Adderholt represents Alabama's 4th district and served in leadership as one of the 4 co-chairs of the Adoption Caucus, the Congressional Coalition on Adoption. Congressman Adderholt has served as co-chair of the CCAI since 2018, and this year is hosting one of our 2022 Foster Youth interns, Stormy, in his DC office. Congressman Adderholt, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, and I'm pleased to join you at this briefing this afternoon, and to hear and to get a chance to have some interaction with all these foster youth interns that are here on Capitol Hill this summer. I'd like to especially recognize, as you mentioned, Stormy, who I've had the privilege to have in our office, and having a distinct honor of welcome him as one of our interns this summer. And so it's great to have Stormy. There he is. So Stormy, good to see you on the video here today. And he's brought a valuable perspective and presence and a level of expertise to our office. And he has graciously shared a lot of his experience with us. And so we've been very honored to have him. And to the foster youth interns, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your work here on Capitol Hill and for sharing your important stories. I believe that the impact that you have made on Capitol Hill will last far beyond the ending of your internship. We will refer back to these experiences, these ideas, and these thoughts that you've shared with us as we move forward on our policy, as how it affects foster children and also their families. I certainly welcome your continued input, and also would like to offer my continued support any way I can. So even though your internship will come to an end soon, please stay in touch with us. We'd love to stay in contact with you so that we can be engaged, and so that we can learn from you, because I think your valuable experience brings so much to the table. So I know I speak for myself, but I think I also speak for other members of the Congress, House and Senate, that we have an open door, that we want to stay engaged. So just because the internship is coming to a close, please know that we do have that. We do have a friendship, and that we want to continue working with you in any way that we can, and be a resource for you, as well as I hope you can be a resource to us. So thank you for having me here today, and I look forward as we continue to hear from others on the call today. Thanks so much.
Representing the great state of Kansas, my name is Stormy Lucas Savage, an advocate with a special interest in social welfare. One of the most impactful moments of my 12-year career happened when I was interning at my local correctional facility. And one of my students came up to me and he said, "Do you remember me?" Those words resonate so much stronger today, because at the time I didn't. but he was my best friend from the group home that we both aged out of. That could have been me. I realized then that's just how blurry the lines between foster care and correctional system can be. And I can see how easily my troubled past might have shifted me into a life of criminal negligence. Depriving youth of potential life opportunities because of criminal status seems fundamentally flawed to me because it is contrary to the primary goal of what foster care is. As a society, we plan most of our policies to be proactive to prevent youth from falling through the cracks. However, one can walk into any correctional facility in this country and see that our policies are failing. To that end, we need to develop stronger policies toward youth who are at risk of intersecting with the criminal justice system. Developing a government accountability office report to record numbers of those youth who would be a big step due to the fact that there is a lack of data on a national level. A few reports have been done locally, such as in New York City, where close to 1,000 youth had experience with foster care while also being incarcerated. Youth who come from traumatized backgrounds also deserve legal representation, and that is why I am a firm believer of the idea that youth in all 50 states should have and need mandatory legal representation in the courtroom. Finally, I'd urge Congress to allocate sources toward a formula-based grant program aimed towards creating best practices for preventing dual system involvement, which would include setting up a youth board. These steps would help give these youth so many more opportunities instead of seeing them languish away in a jail cell. If it takes a community to raise a child, then we shouldn't cast away those who come from troubled environments and might have made a mistake or two. We should strive to create stronger citizens who come from these tough times so that they can truly benefit society. Thank you.
I'm a recent Master's of Social Work graduate of the University of Michigan, and I represent the less than 1% of students who experience foster care and graduate with a master's degree. Statistics paint a grim picture of a foster youth road to college. Those steps aren't polished and lined with gold, more like beat up souls and potholes, debt so high it can be exchanged for gold. Imagine this, over 80% yearn to go to college, to be first generation, to exit stages, and have opportunities outside of incarceration, homelessness, and other familiar statistics we often hear. But those dreams fade and disappear with housing instability, financial gaps, and barriers to financing college. With 97% of emerging adults who experience the foster care system never getting a bachelor's degree, when their peers are flourishing academically and statistically. About 37.9% of the general population walk these same stages. 96% of those from foster care only dream of this because of their access to resources, support, and finances. Imagine transitioning into college and resources being stopped at pivotal moments like ETV, which has a 5-year limit when college is no longer a 4-year path or a master's isn't covered. Or imagine being in care for your entire life and being disqualified for chafing because you didn't enter care at 14. Imagine couch surfing because the campus is closed on holidays or you can't afford to keep your rent paid. Imagine having loans that are debilitating, a system of society that values education, but you can't afford to make it to graduation because the price is too steep, the debt is too deep, the help is too scarce, and the sacrifice is inequitable. Now reimagine chafing ETV as entitlement programs that qualify those with lived experience by just being in care for 1 year without 5-year limits. Imagine, just for 1 second. I recommend that Congress allow the chafing ETV to be used toward tuition, fees, and educational assistance, and to reform eligibility requirements to include young people who entered in foster care at 14 or have spent 1 year and eliminate the ETV 5-year limit. Allow Chafee dollars to support a monthly housing allowance with a stability clause that will provide up to 4 months of housing allowance every year, regardless of a young person's college enrollment status, to account for summer or emergencies, and allow for flexibility for off-campus housing that's based on the fair market rental value. Allow states to use their Chafee and ETV dollars flexibly with the input of young people with experience in foster care, such as for student retroactive loan forgiveness. Imagine my colleagues and me not being here in these seats, because if one thing had gone differently, this conversation and recommendations would have never come from our lips. Over 80% of those with foster care experience desire to go to college, and it's Congress' obligation and to ensure access and support. So I urge Congress to consider reimagining Chafee and ETV. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nigeria Peterson. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I graduated from Western Michigan University with a BA in business law. Foster youth who are aging out of care rely on various federal programs that support their transition from adulthood into housing, employment, education supports. However, in many instances, these services do not always reach young people who are in need and eligible. And when they do access these services, it often takes far too long for you to receive the benefits that are actually helpful. As a foster youth trying to be successful in school, I had to wait months to access important benefits like insurance reimbursement and car stipends that should have taken days or weeks. The instability it caused me during this time left me feeling discouraged from continuing to try to access the support I genuinely needed from the welfare agency. My experience is far too common, and for many youth, this instability and lack of accessibility means that youth do not have the opportunity to be successful because they are balancing their day-to-day and keeping track of paperwork, something a parent will usually assist with. While federal and state officials want to provide resources to support foster youth and have good intentions, the unnecessary processing requirements and frequent delays make these benefits effectively unattainable. In reality, they are drawbacks, not benefits. Thanks to the advocacy of young people who have experienced foster care, Congress has taken action to support youth who are transitioning from foster care to adulthood. Programs like the Chafee program were created to provide funding to help people aged 14 to 23 with the transition to adulthood. In addition, the Education and Training Program, ETV, under Chafee specifically provides funding to support higher education for youth ages 23. Total funding per year for these programs is only $143 million, which is actually very limited, given that over 23,000 youth age out of foster care each year. Surprisingly, some states do not spend all of their Chafee dollars, which means many youth do not end up accessing them. This support that is vital to their transition to adulthood. Yet among all foster youth who have received federally funded transition services in 2015, just 23% received education support or employment assistance. When we know many more foster youth aspire to go to college. Although youth have experienced foster care need far more support, at minimum, the foster care system has a responsibility to ensure that youth can access those benefits that are already available to them. My recommendations to you are: require states to prepare a comprehensive list of resources for foster youth that can still be accessed. Amend the Chafee and ETV programs to allow youth to receive benefits which are entitled to them up to 1 year after aging out in cases of bureaucratic or paperwork delays. Require states to use all of their Chafee funding each year. If they have remaining money that goes unused, require that they partner with young people who have lived experience to determine how to ensure those dollars can effectively benefit foster youth in the state. And finally, the Government Accountability Office explores how eligibility requirements and application processes across different federal benefit programs such as ETB and FAFSA can be streamlined to improve accessibility to these programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I'd now like to introduce Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. Mr. Bacon has been a member since 2017, and since then has been a member of the Adoption Caucus, Congressional Coalition on Adoption. He is also a leader of the House's Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth with his colleagues, Representatives Bass, Langevin, Lawrence, and Mullen. Congressman Bacon has a special personal connection to these issues and has been a leader on legislation such as the Protecting Sibling Relationships in Foster Care Act, which is aimed to keep sibling groups together while in care, which is an effort birthed from a CCAI foster youth intern alumna's policy recommendation presented at a briefing just like this in 2018. Mr. Bacon, I'll turn it to you.
Hi, I adopted through foster care 2 children back in the early 2000s. And today they're now 26 and 27 years old and a total blessing in our lives. I love seeing how they've grown up and they're very much integral to our family. I like supporting the foster care program. There's 400,000 children and young folks involved in foster care. And there were so many issues that we needed to improve. When we had a problem when young folks would age out, they wouldn't have a home, nobody to get help from, they end up homeless. So we've made a lot of improvements over the years to extend that transition period a few years, to give mentors so that people would know how to get health care, for example. We're providing more training to provide trades and help in universities for those who've been in the foster care system. And so we've been working on a whole host of issues. I have legislation to try to keep siblings together so that they're not torn apart more than just their home, but not separated from their brothers and sisters. And we want to ensure that the very first day of foster care is as good as it possibly can be. So I have legislation that supports that as well. And now I'm on legislation with a congressman from Chicago, Congressman Davis, that will provide help for folks in foster care getting driver's license. Because we know that those who get driver's license can get to a job, get to a school, and they have much better outcomes than those who don't get those driver's license. And so we're committed to our foster care program. We want to make it as good as we can. All those 400,000 young folks deserve the very best, and so that we can give them a very successful start in their adult life. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Anna Rose Telemaki. I am from Connecticut and I'm currently a senior attending the University of Connecticut pursuing a dual degree in human development and political science. The Foster Youth to Independence FYI housing voucher will be my main focus. The FYI program was developed by young people who had experienced housing insecurity in the past. Despite their efforts to assist today's youth, housing insecurity remains a major problem. According to data, of the 20,000 youth who reach adulthood each year, about 4,000 go from being in foster care to being homeless. These numbers demonstrate that the fight to keep these young adults off the streets is very much alive. Even after my state finally decided that I qualified for a housing voucher after 3 years of dealing with housing instabilities, it took 9 months for me to both receive the voucher and find a landlord who would accept it. A more robust guaranteed system for housing support for students and young people who have aged out of the foster care system is necessary, as a lot of these former foster youth in situations like mine face inadequate housing assistance from agencies. When examining why housing insecurity is such a significant factor for young adults who have aged out of the child welfare system, one of the biggest problems have been identified is that there's not enough resources available, and many resources are difficult to find due to the limited funding that these various agencies may have. We also understand that some resources are only accessible at a federal level and not on a state-by-state basis in various states. Additionally, the agencies frequently show a lack of urgency in providing the youth with assistance they need. Typically, youth frequently wait longer than 6 months to receive assistance. My recommendations include expanding the Foster Youth to Independence Program, FYI, which offers housing choice vouchers for up to 36 months to young people who have experienced foster care and are at risk of homelessness or already homeless. We can make sure that every young person up to the age of 26 has access to affordable, stable housing after leaving the foster care system. By mandating that the FYI voucher becomes a part of mandatory transitioning, planning for all young people leaving foster care, it is possible to restrict the universal screening program for housing assistance and ensure that no young person leaves foster care experiencing homelessness. These young people would receive support up to the age of 26 and would be assisted by a social worker who has great knowledge of housing support for young people. Establishing a demonstrated program that seeks to forego public/private partnership between child welfare agencies, landlord/management firms would agree to hold a specific percentage of housing stock available for young people leaving foster care at the conclusion of a pilot program. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angelina Wilson. I am from Florida, where I attend the University of South Florida, and I'm currently studying public health. I was in the foster care system from birth, where I had moved from foster home to foster home until the age of 2. I had been in environments where families that I was placed with were not fit to take care of me, and I was subject to neglect. I was adopted at 2 years old and taken in by a family that provided for me financially and physically, but neglected to provide a safe environment for me to live and thrive in. I experienced multiple forms of abuse while I was in this home. I say this because from an outside perspective, you would be led to believe that they were the perfect family. I was with my adoptive family until I was 17, and once I moved away for college, I had the opportunity to realize how traumatizing these experiences had been for me. Currently, I have no interaction with them as they cut me out of their family after I spoke up about abuse that I was experiencing in their home. Many foster youth and adoptees alike have experienced the same thing that I have experienced, forced to live in homes that were not good for their well-being, and no one was aware. There is little to no oversight or follow-up with foster youth and adoptees while they are in these homes. This has happened before. You sit in a position to make a difference. The Foster Care Bill of Rights ensures that foster youth are provided with resources and services that aid in their well-being. However, they might not be aware of these services. The health coordination and oversight plans within Title 4B of the Social Security Act do not include mental health support. They need more funding, they need more oversight, and resources to ensure that they are well implemented. Today, I stand before you to make you aware of this problem, if you are not already aware, and to ask that you join this movement to progress the child welfare system. I urge Congress to require caseworkers to facilitate mandatory wellness check-ins with youth that are confidential to prevent retaliation from a caregiver. I urge Congress to increase the numbers of providers that accept Medicaid. I urge Congress to increase Title 4E funds to educate and support caseworkers, parents, and guardians on trauma-informed support. Malcolm X once said, "A man who stands for nothing falls for anything." Thank you.
My name is Ryan Young, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm currently a sophomore at Phoenix College, and I'm a member of the CCAI FYI 2022 cohort. I have a question for each and every one of you. Go back in time and remember the moment you turned 18 or at 21. For my peers, would you raise your hand if you're comfortable to share? Were you not ready to be an adult at the age of 18 or even at 21? Were you prepared to face life's biggest challenges without any extra support or guidance? As many as 20,000 young people age out from the US foster care system every year, unequipped to face the world. Each of us are trying to hang onto a rope in order to survive while envisioning hopes and dreams and wishes for a better future. Unfortunately, we are given a timestamp, sometimes without notice, to rush to become an adult, in which they have to go through life adulting without a safety net of resources, unlike their peers without foster care backgrounds, or have parents to go to if a financial emergency were to arise. I have to bear this life as someone who has just turned 21 last month and officially exited the extended foster care system in Arizona. Although I nurtured a big community to support me in this scary, lonesome journey, I hope to help change that trajectory because my peers after me have a steeper climb towards ensuring your success towards a thriving transition into adulthood. My recommendation for Congress are bold. There's no question in mind that this would dramatically change the trajectory of young people who experience foster care, and they are: the Congress should increase the federal safety and ETV age eligibility in foster care services to age 26 in every state, jurisdiction, and tribe. Congress should also increase ETV benefits for young people from foster care from $5,000 a year for 5 years to $7,000 for 9 years, non-consecutively, to support young people in their post-secondary aspirations. And lastly, Congress should provide additional funding to support all those states and tribes in re-engaging young adults in transition to adulthood between the ages of 18 to 26, and these efforts should be implemented and in partnership with young people with lived experience in foster care, and especially a focus to engage BIPOC, LGBTQIA, and AAPI and troubled youth and families. Thank you.
I am so appreciative of my fellow colleagues and the work they've put in over the last few months. Policy recommendations brought to the table today represent critical issues faced by those in foster care and those who endure it at any given time. We have truly spent a copious amount of time developing these recommendations, and now it is the end of the beginning and time for a change. I would like to personally believe that we are in for an amazing period of change and to be creators of that said change. We are the 20th class of foster youth interns on behalf of the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. We've shown that we're not here simply as individuals who have lived experience, but rather we're highly trained and committed professionals. As partners who are influential to incite change, I implore you to take our policies to your offices and work with us in the future to ensure the continuity and timeliness of services and funding for youth in and transitioning out of care. I implore you to improve upon our recommendations to fit within new and upcoming legislation. And finally, I'd implore you to advocate for effective change with the context of these recommendations. Thank you all to all the members of the congressional staff, organizations, advocates, and supporters who dedicated time out of the day to come see us live out our dream. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Angelique, and I serve as the policy director here at CCAI. We are now going to go into the Q&A section of the briefing. So if you have questions for the FYI interns, please add them to the chat or raise your hand so we can allow you to speak. Thank you. We have an anonymous question about where you can find the reports. The reports have been linked in the chat, so if you follow that link, you can find the reports there. We also have on the screen access to the digital report. We have another question here and comment. So proud of you all. What are some of your long-term goals? So if anyone would like to start, please kick it off.
I don't mind starting. You know, I'm really big in accessibility, right? And I believe that there are a lot of great legislation that's out there, but young people who come from different walks of life aren't aware of that. And so one of the things that I want to do is create a digital platform that makes young people aware of the different legislation that's out there and resources that they can take advantage of. So not only can they be politically inclined, but they also can know like different rights that they have, and they can advocate for themselves, and they can navigate college and all these other resources. And so they do not have any lapses if there is legislation in their state that can provide that support.
Would anyone else like to answer this question?
Yeah.
What are your long-term goals?
I'll go ahead and go. I am really excited. I'm going to be applying for a dual law degree and PhD program this upcoming fall, and hopefully I'll be attending in 2023. I want to be a civil rights attorney.
Anyone else?
I'll go ahead. I'd like to continue my law education to further push my belief that you need legal representation in all 50 states and to be part of that change.
All right, next question. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate you. My question is, how can congressional staff best support reforming the foster care system? And what would be your most crucial suggestion to do so?
I think that listening to foster youth and adoptees alike and their experiences would help greatly, and take into account what they're saying, and then make sure you're doing oversight in these states and not just giving them funding.
I echo that.
But also add to make sure that if you engage some people, you engage them like throughout the year or years rather than like a one panel or one roundtable, just ensuring that you're always engaging with them and just ensuring that you get their feedback.
Anyone else? Okay, the next question is, thank you all for your the amazing work that you're doing. What hurdles have you faced, and what more can be done to foster the career pipeline of people with lived experience to change the system?
I think I'll say like this summer I aged out officially, and so I guess like all my life I wanted a family all my life, and so like I still haven't reached that yet, and so I think Congress can work to ensure there's a focus on family and just ensuring that people don't age out. And that they're always connected to family or a community always.
Do you mind repeating the question?
Yes. What hurdles have you faced and what more can be done to foster the career pipeline of people with lived experience to change the system?
Yeah, I think that one is to really strip away this role of just being like a foster youth. And consider them to be experts in lived experience, right? And providing not only seats at the table, but like equal abilities for them to give recommendations and for them to have job opportunities, creating whether you're in the House side or Senate, if you have an organization, but making sure that you're reaching out to young people or to adults who have a background in foster care and giving them roles, right? I think that's some of the things that can be done to help.
I'd like to simply echo her statements and add on with a few of my own. One of the biggest hurdles I've faced in the field of advocacy has been the limited knowledge of opportunities out there. This is why it is so important for those at the top level to communicate what opportunities there are and always being on the lookout to create more opportunities. Because these are constituents who are going to serve you at the end of the day and provide you with valuable knowledge that you might not get in a library, you might not get in a university, and you might not get elsewhere. This is where you get data, and that's why it's so important to create opportunity for advocacy.
I'd like to say some.
Can I go ahead?
Okay, so one of the things that I experienced is a lack of urgency with a lot of these different agencies. And when we think about like the lack of urgency, I feel like when people apply for stuff, while these agencies are taking their time and just like sometimes having people resubmit applications, like within that time frame, somebody's dealing with like being hungry, somebody's dealing with like living on the street or not having the proper clothing or not being able to go to school. So, yeah.
We're gonna pause here briefly to turn it over to Representative Danny Davis. One moment.
Again, it looks like Congressman Davis has entered the webinar here, so welcome. Representative Davis has represented Illinois' 13th congressional district since 2013 and has been a member of the Adoption Caucus for many years. Congressman Davis is a staunch advocate for child welfare and adoption as the chairman of the Worker and Family Support Subcommittee on the House Committee on Ways and Means. In addition, Rep. Davis has uplifted child welfare and adoption advocates in his home state of Illinois over many years by recommending several candidates for the CCAI Angels and Adoption Program. He has also hosted several foster interns over the years. So thank you, Congressman Davis. I'll turn it to you.
Well, thank you very much. And let me apologize for being a bit tardy. Sometimes we might have to do 2 or 3 things at one time. And I'm afraid that's what happened to me this afternoon. But I want to thank the Congressional Caucus on Adoption Institute for hosting this event and for operating the wonderful Congressional Internship Program so that these amazing youth can use their expertise to improve policy. As chairman of the Subcommittee on Worker and Family Support with jurisdiction over child welfare, I can tell you firsthand how instrumental lived experience by foster youth has been to shaping and advancing policy reform. Your lived experience helped shepherd in foundational reforms, child welfare law, so that the federal government now pays to strengthen families rather than just break them apart. More recently, it was the persistent advocacy of foster youth that helped Congress enact hundreds of millions of dollars to help older foster youth and families during the pandemic. I also hope that this class of congressional interns consider working on the Hill. A few years ago, I had the privilege of hosting a foster youth who helped craft 6 bills to help foster youth access, afford, and succeed in college, get their driver's license, get money to afford food while in college, address trauma in a positive and supportive way, get jobs via business tax incentives, and maintain meaningful relationships with incarcerated parents. I am certain that this year's class will identify innovative ways that we can improve policy. And I look forward to your ideas. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to give remarks and to celebrate your successful conclusion of the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Congressman Davis. We will now open up the floor again for any questions and answers. I'll turn to my colleague, Angelique.
Thank you, Kate. We have another one. This was wonderful. Great job, everyone. Ryan, you had talked about partnering with youth and LGBTQIA youth to create the policies. Can you talk more about what that could look like?
Yeah, sure. Like in recent years, we've seen time after time that the LGBTQ people are attacked, and especially our transgender people. And so I guess when we partner with LGBTQ individuals to ensure that it's not only a trend or it should be a movement, and especially since we're in a time where same-sex marriage right now is on the line. As someone who would want to have a husband at some point, I really want that as a stepping stone for every young person in the country to have that right. So
Thank you, Ryan.
Can I add on to that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, I'm from California and we have a youth advisory board that recently just passed. And it's young people who experience homelessness, juvenile justice, foster care, and so forth. And they get to look over and have an oversight of different bills that are coming and giving, their perspective. And I think that there's multiple different states that also do have this same concept, but open it up to making sure that those that are LGBTQIA plus two-spirited are on a part of those spaces, and that it's diverse and it's equitable. And when there's any legislation to make sure that, those young people are a part of those conversations and getting feedback. And so I think that each state should have a youth advisory board that is composed of young people that have multiple different backgrounds. And so when legislation or bills or policies or concepts do come in front of their desks, that there is a diverse perspective and insight that can be given.
And this question is for April. In your research, did you find any states that currently have a health advocate for foster youth implemented?
I'm unsure of state level, but there are some counties that have healthcare advocates, as well as insurance companies do provide healthcare advocates. They're very inconsistent in quality and availability, so it's limited. There's a short supply of advocates, and so it's not easily accessible by all youth. It's also usually contingent on if that young person is diagnosed. So those who haven't been diagnosed yet, like myself, would not have been able to access that service.
And this question is for everyone. Amazing job. What is one piece of advice you have for young people listening in today from across the country? Or what is one tip you have for allies who are looking to engage young people in their work? So inspired by all of you. And we'll start with April and go around.
Yeah, my one piece of advice is don't listen to people who doubt you. There's going to be people who doubt you, and you can do it anyway. They're not usually not correct.
Storm.
Well, what I'm gonna say professionally is recognizing all the tokenism that can come with this line of work and being not afraid to call it out. Tokenizing leads to burnout, and that happens within the advocacy space. But in terms of what I'm gonna say for Lay, I'm gonna say, grit your teeth, kid. You got a long journey ahead of you.
For me, I would say that we're no different, you know, you can sit in the same seats and even bigger seats than, you know, I can even touch. And I would also say that, you know, kind of echoing April, like no matter what anyone says to you, no matter the limitations that they put on you, know that you can and just keep moving forward. And to answer the second part of the question of like how people can support, but recognizing tokenism, making sure that you're properly paying young people for their expertise and stop using the word foster youth and calling them more professional names.
Thank you. The advice I would give would be that your voice matters. I know like growing up, I didn't use my voice a lot, because I didn't think that like what I had to say mattered a lot or that people would be listening, but my advice would be that your voice matters and, you know, to use it for the people that are next to you and across the world. The way that other people can support, youth who have experienced foster care, I would say, to show up for those people who have experienced foster care. That would be all.
My piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. And when one agency tells you no, you will find another agency that tells you yes. And don't be afraid to hold these agencies accountable when they fail you. To our allies, I would say, don't censor us when we talk. Allow us to say what we want to say. I feel like when we're censored, then it's just like making it seem like there's not really anything going on, and there's a lot of stuff going on. When I got into advocacy, I feel like I was censored, like don't shake the table, but sometimes you have to shake the table for things to get done.
I would say, you are not your story, and where you start is not where you'll end.
I'll say, use your voice. If there isn't room at the table, make one of your own. And that your value will matter, and that if you don't have someone to support you, you have 400,000 of us who are there to support you and love you.
Thanks, everyone. What an incredible group of young people. Thank you for dedicating your summer to this important cause. Any recommendations for how those of us who are not involved in politics can best support your brilliant ideas?
Yes. Call your Congress members. We've all been working in the offices, and so we receive calls all the time for members, and they make a difference. So call your local Congress member and urge them to implement our ideas.
Yeah. I would also add on to that, right? Let's say you work at a nonprofit or an organization, right? Some of these policies can be implemented there, right? We can start there. Engaging with us, right? Starting to even explore local work. You know, you might have connections with, you know, for instance, I'm from California Department of Social Services or other programs, right? And so you can engage with us in order to, you know, really make sure that our recommendations aren't just left here on this table.
I would say, even if you don't think you have a platform, you have a platform, so maybe repost, share, let more of your family members know, let more of the people that you work with know, just speak, I guess, speak about it.
Then I'll say that members of Congress are elected to help you, and so just make sure that you call, email, or write a letter, and that when you do call them, that the staff are there to help you and to ensure the message gets across, and most times it does.
So proud of you all. What has been your biggest takeaway from your summer on the Hill?
My biggest takeaway is the sheer magnitude of some of these opportunities available and how there's always going to be more opportunities. The network is always expanding with in terms of what's new, what's happening. And a lot of these opportunities weren't as widely available when I was in foster care all the way back in 2010. The scene is always changing, and I always applaud people who are at the table and those who create these new opportunities.
The next question, in your experience during college, what suggestions and or advice could you give us who work in higher education that will help us to better serve foster youth while in college?
I think that, as someone who went to school out of state and didn't receive much funding and had to fundraise and had to really learn, how to get money to go to college, right? Because I understood that stability is important, right? Being able to finance it is important. And when I graduate, right, having mountains of debt isn't going to get me to the opportunities or just going to further delay me. And I think that some of the things is really focusing on stability. How are we stabilizing students that have foster care experience? Are we ensuring that their housing isn't being disrupted if they do live on campus? Most campuses close down during holidays, and most those with foster care experience cannot go back home. So what are we doing to ensure that they're able to stay on campus? How are we making sure that they have access to food? Because again, when campus closes, so does the halls for food. How are we making sure that students are aware of the different resources and different scholarships and different financial opportunities? And so I think that really creating a stability plan for all students with foster care experience, and really sitting down with them and asking them questions, what do they need? What is the type of supports that they're hoping for? And really engaging them, because sometimes we can make all these ideas and suggestions and you go do it without their input, right? And even as someone with former experience, I can't speak on their behalf. And so I think that's the first step, is ensuring that we're engaging students with foster care experiences and we're developing things that are going to meet their individualized needs.
I can go next. I would say that to just know the foster youth that are at the university, like most of the time the administration doesn't know. And also like Christina said, like asking youth who've experienced foster care, asking them what they need. And also like the biggest thing that helped me through college, other than like financial support, was my village. And so like being a village to those who have experienced foster care, like they poured into me. When school drained me, they loved on me when I needed love, and they took care of me, like despite any financial need that I needed. Like they just really poured into me, and that support just carried me to the finish line.
Yeah, echoing everyone has just said, I think also the age cap is a huge barrier. It took me a lot longer than our fellow peers who aren't in care to graduate from community college. And so by the time I got to a four-year university and went out of state on top of it, I had capped all the federal funding available. And so funding was pretty much non-existent, and I had to rely on student loans, which finding a co-signer was a huge barrier. So really looking at like college doesn't end at 23 or 26. A lot of us go on after that, and grad school. So Christina's report really speaks to that. So really looking at removing those age caps and making sure financial help is available to foster youth so that we can go to college.
And this question is for Anna. What was some of the things you experienced and were helpful or unhelpful? I know you mentioned some of the timing issues, so if you could speak to what you think would work better for folks across the country.
Some of the things that I experienced, as I stated previously, was a lack of urgency. Lack of urgency. Sometimes I applied for certain things and I would be waiting from certain agencies to respond back to me, and they wouldn't, or they would tell me like, hey, you need to submit this. When I was waiting for my voucher, I started off with one social worker, and I was with her for like 6 months, And then the last 3 months, she was like, you know what, I'm not able to help you. I don't know what I can do, so I'm gonna switch you over to somebody else. So when I was with that person, they didn't know anything that was going on, so I had to retell them everything. I had to reapply for certain things. And also another thing is a lot of agencies, like the agencies that I've got my voucher through, they had told me like, oh, once you move in, we're gonna help you with this, this and that. And then when I actually did move in, they were like, oh, no, we can't help you. So I feel like, not agencies shouldn't say that they're gonna do something that they're not gonna like hold their words and stuff like that. Yeah.
Another question. I love that there is an ask to stop the term foster youth. What would be your suggested replacement for that overly used term that would be much more trauma informed, empowering, excuse me?
I often use the word emerging adults. And just replacing like, professional names, like, if you are someone that has a certain background, no one's going around calling you by that background, right? They're calling you by whatever position you hold, whatever degree you hold, title you may have. And so I think that using the same type of language, right? That those would be my suggestions. I don't think that there should be a specific word that should center those that have lived experience. I think that we should just hold them knowing that they have lived experience, but then allowing them to be whoever that they choose to be or to whatever they want to be called. I don't think there should be a specific name for those with lived experience.
Yeah, I'd also like to add to that. So when we look at a lot of positions, they're called foster youth advocate or foster youth consultant. The reality is we're doing policy and legislation work. So why not just call it policy and legislation consultant or I don't know, advocate, like anything that doesn't say foster youth, because the reality is we're experts and we don't need to center, like Christina said, we don't need to center that we have lived experience in the title.
We've heard recommendations from members of Congress on how to support youth in the improvement of child welfare. So what's next? Has your time on the Hill guided you to take on a leadership role as an elected official?
Ooh, that's a good question. I definitely have always had like ambitions to one day, take on a position. But what is that gonna be locally? Is that gonna be federally? I don't know. But it definitely did give me a good insight into if I was to take on that position, what type of senator, assembly person, or whatever the case may be, that I would be. Because I understood the brilliance that's in the room of staff who are doing a lot of legwork and are the bodies to how everything moves. And so I don't know yet, but I guess you'll.
And we have some FY alumni in the room, so I'd also like to give them a chance to ask questions if they do have any questions. And please stand up.
I'm never shy. Hi, everybody. Oh, Jesus, I don't understand. Hey, everybody, Tony Parsons, FYI class of 2014. They actually launched my career getting out to DC and doing policy work. But my biggest question I have for you guys is now that you've gone through this entire summer, what is the one thing you're going to take away to do in your local community now that you've learned how to do it up here? How are you going to do it down there? There's a lot of words. Yeah, please.
One of the things that I want to do is advocate for other youth. I feel like I spent such a long time advocating for myself and I've gained so much knowledge throughout my experience. Now it's like, okay, I want to fight for somebody else to get the help that they need.
I would like to work with individuals who I know can get things moving and like work directly with them. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I would really like to focus on disabled youth. I think it's a topic that isn't talked about enough, and I really want to use my experience being disabled to really be a voice and help bring other people to the table who also experience disability.
Yeah, I think that this gave me a lot of different ideas on how to support those, that are trying to go to post-secondary education, those that have even backgrounds outside of foster care, I think that all of my advocacy journey, I've been focusing strictly on those with foster care experience, but just like Stormy said, a lot of us have also experiences with juvenile justice and homelessness, and so really wanting to expand my advocacy work and policy work to also capture and support those that have different backgrounds as well.
Any other questions from Ellen?
Oh, comment. Hi, guys. Just really proud of all the work that you guys have put in over the summer. So excited. You guys are definitely the next trailblazers. Just listening to your policies, a lot of knowledge, all that stuff. Very proud. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What an incredible cohort. So good to hear your wisdom today and your recommendations. My question is for April. Based on your research, do you envision a dedicated healthcare advocate supporting and assisting foster youth as they navigate healthcare?
Yeah, so my vision of that would be someone to sit down one-on-one and help that young person get referrals, manage the records. My condition is very complex, and so I need to have like a bunch of different specialists. And so it's been kind of a nightmare to keep track of 6 different specialists while moving out of state, and also placement changes affected that. And so I started over a lot because the records weren't there, or I was moving in the middle of testing. So really having that person one-on-one would have made a huge difference to make sure that I was able to get those referrals and stay with those referrals, and then make sure that I'm actually getting care instead of just doing diagnostic testing for years on end over and over again.
Thank you. And Lena, this question is for you. Based on your research, why don't more providers accept Medicaid, and how can we incentivize them to do so?
Thank you for your question. I won't say based on my research, but I would say that providers, they know that Medicaid is from the state and it's not private funding. So it's like, I don't know how to explain it. You can come back to me.
Okay, thank you. How close are we to passing a foster youth bill of rights, and where can we get access to a draft of the foster youth bill of rights?
So there are a lot of states that have foster youth bill of rights that are out there. And I mean, I can only speak for California, but I had the privilege of working on one of the most comprehensive foster youth bill of rights. And so it is state by state. I don't remember the exact numbers. We can get back to you on exactly how many states do have a foster youth bill of rights. But if your state doesn't have one, or if you were, someone that works on federal level, I think that really working with people like Anna and, people that are at this table to create one that can, on a federal level would be amazing.
Thank you, Christina.
Florida, I'm not sure if they've done it yet, but when I was doing my research, Florida is the one that was supposed to be implementing it. So that's the one that I did my research on.
Next question is, thank you for your stories and ideas. For those of you who experienced adoption, can you talk about any support you received or didn't receive while you were going through your adoption? How did adoption help or not help you? How can efforts to support adoptions be improved?
Okay. Honestly, I didn't receive a lot of support other than the family that I was with. And a lot of things that would happen in the household, it would be like, oh, keep it in the household. I received Medicaid, but other than that, that was pretty much it. Like nobody knew what was actually happening in the household. Can you repeat the last part of the question?
How can efforts to support adoptions be improved?
I would say make sure you're in those households. I would say make sure that these adoptees have someone that they can go to without the family there. When they go to the hospital, make sure the parent is not there with them. When they're in school, know that they are an adoptee. Just really create those safe environments for them to speak up about anything that's happening in the home, because I know that there's systems in place specifically for foster youth, but there's not, like, no one really knows what's happening in homes of adoption.
Yeah.
Also, I like that the federal government kind of mandates that all states require a survey of parents, not youth. One way to improve that is to ensure that all the states are asking people how to, like, how your adoption went. Is there ways that they can help you and guide you in the aftermath, and should ensure that it's also very anonymous as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna echo what you both just said, but I think also oversight, Lena talks about in her report, is really key. It is true, like when I was adopted, there was no like oversight afterwards until I re-entered care. And so really looking at like what the experience is, and I think also like it's not just are you fed, are you clothed, do you have a place to live? I think it goes so much deeper than that. So a lot of adoptive parents are not necessarily prepared for the trauma that young people have experienced and how to deal with that. So better training for adoptive parents on how to be trauma informed, and as well as oversight.
What can we do locally to implement your recommendations?
For mine, I would say that to not have a age cap as far as to who you serve and for how long.
For mine, I would say to stop the discrimination when somebody has a housing voucher, because it's still the rent is still gonna get paid.
I would say some of these eligibility requirements, in my opinion, some of them are not necessary and they're like really harmful to people who really need these services.
For my answer, I would say utilization of family first funding within your community and ensuring it goes to the right places. When I look at family first funding within the state of Kansas, we're utilizing it towards mental health services as a means to kind of negate any entry into the criminal justice system and to keep families together. Because a happy family is less likely to have any criminogenic behavior.
I would say that to ensure that colleges, post-secondary, also community colleges are in communication with one another about the services that they're providing, ensuring that there is mentorship that is on campuses for those that have foster care experience, ensuring that there's more access to food services, that you are working in conjunction with housing programs and different organizations that provide support for those that are pursuing higher education, to know about the different scholarships that are available, and to provide all of that to young people who are pursuing post-secondary education or community college.
And this last question is for everyone. What are the best methods of outreach to ensure that resources actually reach foster youth who need it? And we'll start with Brian.
I would say that to ensure that the resources actually meet the needs of people and families, and to not assume what the people and families need.
I would say talk to these states and like watch what they're doing with the funding. I want to use the word receipt, like make sure they have a receipt for what they're using it for. And just talking to people like us, it does a lot.
I agree with my colleague Lena. Definitely making these states provide receipts for what they're using these fundings for. And I know some of my colleagues talked about like chafety dollars going back for these agencies to talk to these students and make sure like before they send it back, like, hey, does anybody else need help with this or that?
Yes, I would say talking to the agencies that are in your state. A lot of times, like youth who have experienced foster care, they're connected with their agency, so that's how you can get resources to them, information to them. Social media, and it's the community that you're in, like I know that there's foster youth who are in your community, so just reach out to them and see what they need.
I agree, right? Really connecting with young people, to ask those questions, like what are the social media platforms that are being used right now? And the reason why I started Everything College, which is on TikTok, was because of that reason. There was a lot of resources there, but access was, far and in between. And so, for instance, I created a video that was 1 minute that was very engaging about the higher education emergency relief funding. And I got over a couple million views, and a lot of students were able to access it because of that. And so really utilizing social media, but not only utilizing it, but utilizing it in a way that is not only youth friendly, but also short, very simplified and to the point, because utilizing jargon and stuff like that just only confuses your user base. And I would also say to work with people like myself in developing those and yeah.
You want to ensure that youth know what resources they have. Why don't you ask the youth themselves and make them knowledgeable about what's going in their pockets? It doesn't make sense to ask someone, a third party, what they're handing out to someone and ensuring that it gets them. So why don't you ask the youth themselves if they receive this funding, make it a part of their case? To me, that's gonna be your best solution, and it's the simplest solution.
I think my recommendation would be to centralize information as much as possible. I think a lot of the services I found out were word of mouth through other youth. And what was happening is you were only able to access that if you happened to know a person who knew about it. And when you did have access to agencies, certain agencies had some information and other agencies had others. So it's very all over the place. So trying to centralize it as much as possible. Really either being like a database, a call center, or go to your youth advisory board or your youth-led organization in your state. And they are commonly giving out information to young people.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to hear from our 20th class of foster youth interns. I would like to express sincere gratitude to the leadership of our board of directors and support from our faithful partners. We'd love to give special thanks to the American Council of Life Insurers, Apollo Global Management, Arnold and Porter, Brownstein Hyatt Barber Schreck, Bruce and Linda Graham and BEB, Carlson Family Foundation, Comcast NBC Universal, Conrad and Hilton Foundation, Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and Retail Orphan Initiative. Also, a very special shout out to the amazing staff at CCAI, Angie, Sarah, and Isabel, and also our amazing summer intern team, Ricky, Joey, Lisette, and Audrey. You are all integral members of our small but mighty team, and this program would not happen without you. So thank you. And lastly, to the class of foster youth interns, thank you for paving the way toward a better future and removing barriers, expanding equitable access, improving outcomes, and ensuring that children, youth, and families who encounter the U.S. child welfare system do not face the same obstacles that you experienced. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We wish we could have been in person. A recording of this briefing will be posted on CCAI's YouTube page. And for those local in the DC area, we are hosting a small reception with the FYIs at Crimson DC in the Gallery Place neighborhood around 5 o'clock if you'd like to stop by and say hello. But again, thank you for taking some time in your afternoon to hear from our advocate experts, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.